5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Loudermilk, Ranking Member Torres, and members of the subcommittee. It is hard to believe that it has been almost 3 years since January 6th, and we are still having congressional hearings to identify what contributed to that tragic day. To date, there have been 4 congressional reports, along with several Inspector General and Government Accountability Office reports, and they continue to support what many of us have suspected from the very beginning. January 6th was an intelligence failure. We rely on accurate intelligence to help us develop effective security and operational plans. Accurate intelligence is an essential factor in the decision-making process of the Capitol Police, the Capitol Police Board, and the oversight committees. We now know that significant intelligence existed, that individuals were plotting to storm the Capitol building, target lawmakers, and discussing shooting my officers. And yet no intel agencies or units sounded the alarm. We were blindsided. Intelligence failed operations. The January 6th attack at the Capitol was preventable. If the intelligence had been accurately reported and the FBI and DHS had followed their policies and established practices, I wouldn't be sitting here today. There was a failure to connect the dots on 9/11 and again on January 6th. I'm concerned if we do not identify and correct these issues, we may fail again in the future. I did everything I could to protect and defend the U.S. Capitol and the members of Congress prior to and on January 3rd. Prior to January 6th and prior to and on January 6th. On January 3rd, I requested the assistance of the National Guard to support my perimeter and was denied by the 2 sergeant-at-arms over the concern for politics and optics. Still concerned for the number of personnel I had on my perimeter, I called the MPD earlier on the morning of January 6th and asked if they could stage additional personnel closer to the Capitol on Constitution Avenue. Less than 2 hours later, we were violently attacked on the west front of the Capitol at 12:53 p.m. I immediately followed up on that morning call and contacted MPD Chief Carroll at 12:55 p.m. and requested those resources. MPD was on the scene within minutes and were assisting my officers in holding the line and delaying the breach of the building. It took 81 agonizing minutes for that mob to fight their way through numerous police lines before they were able to breach the Capitol. The decision to reach out to MPD proved critical in safeguarding the members of Congress. Minutes after the attack began, I made my first call to House Sergeant-at-Arms Paul Irving at 12:58 p.m. to request approval to bring in the National Guard. "Let me run it up the chain and I will get back to you," was his response. It would be 71 minutes before that approval would finally come. Between 12:58 and when I finally received approval for the National Guard at 2:09 p.m., I made 32 calls to coordinate support from my officers, including at least 11 frustrating calls to the Sergeant-at-Arms regarding my request for the National Guard. My calls to my partner law enforcement agencies resulted in hundreds of police officers from around the National Capital Region and as far away as New Jersey responding to assist. After I received approval to call in the National Guard, I then had to beg the Pentagon officials to send us help. I was repeatedly denied assistance by the Army Lieutenant General Pyatt, citing concerns over optics of the National Guard on Capitol Hill. The D.C. National Guard, many of whom were standing within eyesight of the Capitol and whose motto is Capitol Guardians, would not arrive until almost 6 p.m. After the fighting was over and the Capitol grounds secured. The New Jersey State Police arrived before they did. To add insult to injury, the Inspector General for the Department of Defense considered the response, quote, appropriate. Besides the MPD, the National Guard was the next largest cadre of personnel that could be deployed to assist my officers. We desperately needed those boots on the ground. The fact that the Chief of Police, responsible for the entire legislative branch of government, was repeatedly denied assistance by the Pentagon is indefensible. The fact that an experienced law enforcement official was constrained by federal law from bringing in life-saving resources for his officers is unfathomable. This type of politicized control over and oversight was and continues to be detrimental to the mission. Why bring in an experienced police chief if you are not going to allow him to do his job? In December 2021, Congress amended 2 U.S.C. 1970, the law that restricted my ability to bring in federal resources. While the amendment now grants the chief authority to call in federal resources only during an emergency, it does not grant the chief authority to request federal resources in advance of an event, which means the request can still be denied. In other words, the law still requires the chief to seek advance approval from the Capitol Police Board and congressional leadership. This is exactly what I faced on January 3rd. It should also be noted, that the new amendment makes the chief emergency authorization revocable. I am extremely proud and appreciative of the Capitol Police officers, the Metropolitan Police Department, and the other law enforcement agencies that came to our assistance. Despite bureaucratic issues on the Hill and a no-show by the military, it was law enforcement that saved the day, and not a single member of Congress was injured. Thanks to the assisting law enforcement, the men and women of the Capitol Police did not fail in their mission. In conclusion, I ask that this committee address the institutional failures that contributed to January 6th. I also implore the committee to have an independent entity investigate the complaints and allegations of retaliation against Intel whistleblowers following January 6th, and to review any of the personnel actions, to include disciplinary actions that occurred following January 6th, to ensure they were properly investigated and not subject to any inappropriate actions, coercion, influences, or predetermined outcomes. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chief Sund. Now recognize the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, for 5 minutes.
Chief Sund, some have characterized January 6th as an intelligence failure. Is it true that when you were chief of police, Ms. Yogananda Pittman was the assistant chief of police in charge of the intelligence division, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
In your book, I believe you wrote that the information regarding potential threats prior to January 6th was received by the United States Capitol Police Intelligence Division, but you were not made aware of it until after January 6th. Is that correct, yes or no?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Had you seen the United States Capitol Police Intelligence Assessment Report in full issued on January 4th before January 6th? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
You had seen the January 4th report?
When you say January 4th, it's dated. Now, I just want to make sure there is a January 4th report. It's a Department of Intelligence, a daily intelligence report. That one?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. Would this intelligence assessment report have changed your actions had you received it and fully understood all the ramifications of it?
When you say fully understood the ramifications of it, there was nothing supporting.
Well, what I'm getting to is that apparently, and what I've understood was that as chief of police, you received the report, but there was a comment about some intelligence or about some concerns, but it was put on the last page of the report instead of on the first page. Is that accurate?
Okay, yeah, just to make sure we're clear, you're referring to the January 3rd.
January 3rd,
It's actually
all right.
dated, yeah, January 3rd, 20, it's dated 2020, it's supposed to be 2021.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the final intelligence assessment, but not the final intelligence report that's put out.
All right.
That's
Sorry, I
correct.
got my lingo mixed up.
No problem. It's a 15-page report with the intelligence assessment at the end behind 2.5 pages of street closures. Correct, sir.
Well, wouldn't you expect there to be some kind of a warning on the front page or an alert or a highlighting of the fact that there might be a concern by your intelligence department?
When you see the amount of intelligence that they had in advance, and you can look at some of the testimony from the people that put it together, there was a failure to include specific intelligence that would have been critical to my men and women to be better prepared for that day. Yes.
All right. Just so I'm clear, because I'm not sure I understood the answer.
No.
Was there something highlighted in the report, or was it that there wasn't information that you needed to get to your officers?
Yeah, there wasn't information. There was when you talk about the assessment, the intelligence assessment, the very last paragraph doesn't tell you anything other than pretty much what we're expecting from any of the previous MAGA rallies. That it could be, there could be some danger, there could be some.
So it was a fairly
skirmishes.
standard response and not something that would have highlighted that there was a real threat and a real concern.
Correct. Not what you're seeing now about storming the Capitol, killing the palace guards, which is referring to my officers. None of that was included in the intelligence. Correct.
But that information was available to Ms. Pittman?
It was available to IICD, which is a unit she runs. Yes, sir.
All right. And Ms. Pittman approved that report that did not pass that information on to you. Is that correct?
It came out of her unit, sir.
Subsequent to January 6th, when Ms. Pittman was retiring, she was given what I call a sweetheart deal from the United States Capitol Police. That was earlier this year. She was placed on leave without pay while working a new job for several months, about 5, before she reached the eligible age to retire. Now, it's clear she had no intent to return to the United States Capitol Police, which is what the handbook says you're supposed to be doing if you get leave without pay. There has to be an expectation of return. During your time in management with the United States Capitol Police, had you ever heard of such a sweetheart deal before?
No, sir.
When you were in management, did counsel Thomas Tad Tobias ever indicate that you had the power to give somebody a leave without pay so they could get to retirement without an expectation that they would at least attempt to return to the United States Capitol Police Service?
No, sir, not that I recall. Nope.
Nobody's ever told you you could do that.
No, sir.
Did you think you had that power?
It's written in the policy that you can't offer.
You can't offer, but there's a requirement to be an expectation to return. In this
Right.
case, there was not.
That is correct. You're
So you
expected-
never had the expectation that you could give somebody leave without pay unless they were planning on coming back. Somebody that might have a health problem or something like that's what it's for, isn't it?
Correct, that's the policy. That
All right. Since January 6, 2021, have you learned of other intelligence reports, and I think you mentioned in your opening, in the possession of the United States Capitol Police or other federal agencies, which could have been of assistance to you and your decision-making on January 6th?
Yes, sir, I have.
All right. I see that my time is up, and so I will now yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Torres, for 5 minutes.
I join the chairman in welcoming the witness before this committee.
Thank you, ma'am.
Since the insurrection, more than 1,100 individuals have been arrested and charged with crimes associated with the January 6th insurrection. This includes 404 defendants who have been charged with assaulting more than 140 law enforcement officers. 115 of those defendants have been charged with using a deadly or dangerous weapon or causing a serious physical injury to an officer. So far, 770 defendants have been convicted, including 65 defendants who have been convicted of assaulting law enforcement officers. I've had the opportunity to meet with some of the Capitol Police officers who were severely injured and still struggle with the events of that horrible day. Yet they still show great strength and courage and still serve the force in order to continue to protect us. Mr. Sun, I have a series of easy questions and kindly ask you to answer yes or no. There has been a direct effort here in this committee and by many Republicans to rewrite the violent events that took place here at the Capitol on January 6th. For example, President Trump called the defendants, and I quote, great patriots. Mr. Sun, do you agree with former President Trump that those convicted of January 6 related offenses are, quote, great patriots? Yes or no, sir?
You know, I'm here to try and identify.
It's
the
just a simple yes or no. Do
institutional failures.
you believe that the people that assaulted your officers are great patriots? Yes or no?
I think the people that assaulted my officers with weapons and violated the law, assaulting them and injuring them
The
deserve.
former president also said that the rioters that day, and I quote, had love in their heart, and that it was, I quote, a beautiful day. Do you agree, Mr. Sun, with the former president that it was a beautiful day on January 6th and that those people that attacked your officers had love in their heart?
It was not a beautiful day, ma'am.
And did they have love in their heart while they were attacking your officers, sir?
I don't know what they had in their heart.
Okay, on January 13th, 2021, Speaker Kevin McCarthy, when he was minority leader, said, and I quote, last week's violent attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, un-American, and criminal. So, Mr. Sun, do you agree with Speaker McCarthy that the attack on the Capitol was undemocratic, yes or no?
I agree that those that committed violations of laws deserve to
Do
be held
you
accountable.
agree that it was un-American, sir?
Again, I think those that violated the law deserve to be held accountable.
Do you agree that it was criminal?
Yes.
Speaker McCarthy also said, and I quote, some say riots were caused by Antifa. There's absolutely no evidence of that. Do you agree, Mr. Sun, that the January 6, 2021 riot was not caused by Antifa? Yes or no?
I don't have information to answer that.
In
one way.
fact, then Minority Leader McCarthy also went on to say that former President Trump, quote, bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. Mr. Sun, do you agree that former President Trump, and I quote, bears responsibility for the attack? Yes or no, sir?
Again, ma'am, I'm here to identify the
It's
institutional
a simple
failures.
question, sir. Do you agree that what the incidents that led the president to push people here
I think this is, if you give me a
Let me
second, I
ask you
just
one
think it's
other
part of the reason why
question.
the American
Do you
public is so.
agree that former President Trump should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding at the Capitol, yes or no?
I would have liked some assistance with getting the military to the Capitol. That's correct, ma'am.
Minority Leader McCarthy continued, and I quote, "These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term." So my question to you, Mr. Sun, to this day, has former President Trump accepted his share of responsibility or done anything to, quote, quell the brewing unrest he cultivated?
I think there's a lot of people that need to accept some responsibility associated with this.
Okay. Finally, Leader McCarthy said, and I quote, "And the president, immediate action also deserves congressional action, which is why I think a fact-finding commission and a censure resolution would be prudent." Unfortunately, Leader McCarthy's courage did not last long. He chose to vote against the bipartisan bill establishing a commission negotiated by the ranking Republican member of the Homeland Security Committee and containing all of his priorities. This is unacceptable, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.